Hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours. I am Jeff Blankenburg, and as we do every week, we're here to answer your questions about Alexa development and all the things that kind of go around that. So first, I want to make sure I cover off on a couple of announcements, the first of which is that I am actually not in my normal location. You may have noticed that just by looking at it. But I want to make sure that you know what's going on. I'm actually at an event this week called the Voice Summit. And I'm here as a speaker. There's a bunch of folks here from Alexa, and we're here talking with the future of voice, all sorts of people doing all sorts of interesting things in the world of voice. And it's a fantastic event here in Washington, D.C. So that's one. I just want to let you guys know that that's where I happen to be today. And so if we have some odd noise or some extra people in the background or whatever, that might be what's going on. Another thing I wanted to let you know is that while we're here at the Voice Summit, many of you have been working hard on your skills for our hackathon. We are going to be announcing the winner of our hackathon tomorrow here at the Voice Summit. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And we'll share a link to where that live stream is going to be. In addition, if you guys have been following our awesome series called Alexa Innovators, we just had a new episode drop on Friday. I believe it was on Friday. About the company Akinator. It's actually, the company is called Eloquence, but they make a skill called Akinator. You may have played it before as a mobile app or as a website, but it's basically an artificial intelligence that can play 20 questions with you. Think of a character from any TV show, movie, whatever. It'll ask you a few questions, and before you know it, it knows the answer. It's quite good, quite surprising. And so we had an opportunity to sit down with them and talk about how they built their skill, how their technology works. Very, very cool. One last thing I want to add, and I'm sure I'm going to get some responses to this both in the chat and email and Twitter and everywhere else. In a couple of weeks, one of our good friends of the show, Brian Tarbox, is actually going to be joining me here on stream. And so we're going to bring him in. We're going to talk about his process, what he does to go into building skills. And I hope that this will lead to a future where many of you have the opportunity to come and join us on Office Hours and talk about the things that you're building as well. So keep that in the back of your mind as we go. I'm really looking forward to having more opportunities to talk with all of you. And so we'll do that here in the very near future. In the meantime, I have some very special guests with me today, two of which have cameras that are working and one that doesn't. But Karthish, Abhishek, and Deepika are all here, and they're here from our certification team. I'd love to have you guys introduce yourselves. So why don't we start with you, Karthish?
Thanks, Jeff. Just making sure that I'm audible.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Karthish. I've been with Amazon for a little over 5 years now. I manage policy certification, and my team makes sure that any skill that is submitted to Alexa meets all the policy requirements before it is certified and in the catalog. Yeah, so that's about myself. Happy to be here and chatting with you all.
Cool. How about you, Abhishek?
Hey, thank you for inviting us, Jeff. Yep, it's going to be a great interactive session for sure with our wonderful developers here. We always learn something new from our developers. About me, I'm an operations manager too with the Alexa certification team. My role here is to ensure we certify skills as per our skill certification guidelines, and at the same time work towards improving the certification experience of our developers. That's our top priorities.
And Deepika.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you for having me here. Hey, everyone. I'm Deepika. I'm working as a process specialist at Alexa Skills Insights team. I've been with Amazon for over 5 years now. I was initially a part of the certification team, and now I work with the Alexa Skills Insights team, where we try to help developers in improving their skills, quality, and engagement. I specialize in working with the developers to monetize their skills. So that's about me. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. So I have a couple of questions that I'd love to get this conversation started with. And then I'm sure our audience is going to have a lot of questions about certification and how to get a hold of you and how to navigate some of the things. But the first one is, how should developers prepare themselves when they're going into certification to get the best possible results from their certification process?
I can take that question, Jeff. So there are a lot of aspects that determine if a skill clears certification or not. But at a high level, as a thumb rule, we say two things. One, provide us with all the required information needed to test your skill, right? And you can do that by providing the details in your testing instructions. Two, test the skill thoroughly before submitting it. Coming to the point one, when I say provide all the required testing instructions, I mean, if your skill implies an account linking feature, then ensure the account linking credentials are given to us for us to test the skill. If the skill has a brand name, trademark, etc., right? Provide us with all the required external links and IP right documentation so that we can go ahead and review that and ensure that it meets our guidelines. If, for example, if a skill is using a smart home API, then share a list of commands which your skill supports, right? And this is very important to provide this information for the customers as well, right? Provide them in the customer-facing information. Additionally, if there's any specific testing instructions you would want us to look into, please share them here. That's the entire that's the exact point that we have this section. This makes our job a lot more easier to understand what the developers' expectations are from us while testing the skill, and this makes it a lot easier. Apart from that, if there's any permissions that users need to be if there's any requests or permissions that the users need to be provided with, then always explain why these permissions have to be given and how are we going to be using these permissions, right? And lastly, to test all the sample example phrases, etc., which is provided from the which is provided by the on the skill, because that's the first and foremost information the customers look into. So once you're thorough with these things, providing testing instruction, providing the relevant content, which require us to be looking into, for us to look into the skill to understand it thoroughly, and you itself, the developers itself testing the skill, it makes it a lot more easier. And there are a lot of content also which is readily available to ensure how we can ensure there's no failures while implementing these recommendations.
Yeah, there's some good advice in there. Thank you so much for that. We're going to have many more questions about certification from our audience, and I'll get to those in just a second. But I want to make sure that I cover a couple of the top level things. So this one's for you, Karthish. How can developers ensure that they're actually adhering to our content guidelines? I know that I spend a lot of time encouraging people to go read our certification guidelines, both the policy as well as the rest of it. And I'm just curious, what are there any things that you can recommend to developers that they should do before they submit for certification?
Sure. I'm going to focus on policy guidelines. Abhishek spoke about overall skill certification. So let's talk more about what are some of the common failures we've seen with policy certification and how we could ensure that we don't end up having a skill rejected for these common failures. So all skills submitted to Alexa must adhere to our policy guidelines, right, to maintain high quality catalog of Alexa skills store. Our certification data indicates that about 85 to 90% of skill pass for policy certification, and that's how high our yield is for policy. The remaining 10-15% which fail for policy requirements are mostly rejected for one of the top concerns that I would be covering now. So the first common failure is trademarks, intellectual property, and brands. This is a very common failure that we've seen in policy certification. We are very conservative when it comes to skill testing for Amazon intellectual property, brands, and services, and as well as any other brand, any third-party brand apart from Amazon. So let's talk in detail about some don'ts, with respect to trades, intellectual property, and brands. Skills cannot infringe on Amazon intellectual property anywhere in the skill metadata, like title, invocation name, vendor name, icon, welcome phrases, privacy policy URL, terms of use URL, and account linking URLs. Skills cannot use images or likeliness of an Amazon device as part of the skill icon. Skill cannot infringe on intellectual property of a third-party brand other than Amazon. However, if your skill makes legitimate use of trademark, intellectual property, or brands, then a valid proof of right should be submitted to certification team to assess the necessary permission. The second common failure is with invocation name. Let's talk about a few tips to ensure a skill meets the invocation name requirement. So the first one is one-word invocation names are not allowed unless the invocation name is unique to a brand intellectual property with proof of ownership established. Invocation name should not be a name of a person or location unless they contain other words in addition to the name. Invocation name should follow all required conventions for initialism and spelling. The invocation name must contain only lowercase alphabetic characters, should have spaces between words, should include apostrophes and periods. Any reference to numbers should be spelled out. The invocation name cannot spell out tokenized words and should be used as is. Should be a word that is likely present in the dictionary, should not contain wake word, should not contain launch phrase. Moving on, the third common failure that we've seen is supported language. The skills metadata, skills content responses, all of it should be presented in an Alexa supported language, or all content is in the same language as user selected device locale. Finally, the last common failure that we've observed is privacy policy. A skill that collects personal identifiable information must include a valid privacy policy. Privacy policy should be specific to a skill, should not be a blank page. And in case of a brand, the vendor name in the privacy policy should match with the skill vendor name. So there you go. So those are the most common failures we've seen with respect to policy certification.
That's great.
For more details, for more details, there is a separate policy requirement page under the certification requirements section in the Alexa developer documentation. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Kardish. And then, so as we think about certification, you talked about policy, but there's also a whole side to monetizing. So from a certification viewpoint, what are the common failures that you see developers running into when they're monetizing a skill? Deepika, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. I'll answer that question. Okay, so ISP skills review has a process flow. I'll elaborate that. So before deciding to monetize your skill, all the developers should see if their skill is eligible to offer ISPs. That's the first thing, so that you don't invest time in building ISPs and then getting rejected by the certification. So it's important that you go through the eligibility criteria. And so a documentation will be shared in the chat window for everyone's reference. And so now I'll talk about some of the top failure reasons that we see in an ISP skill. So one thing is lack of an upsell, which is most common failure that we see in fresh submission skills when they're submitted for the first time. We see that even though the skill supports a buy intent, there is no upsell message present, and this takes repeated submissions to for us to convey that an upsell message is required. So the skill should provide an upsell for in-skill products. Basically, in addition to the explicit buy intent that handles direct purchase requests, customers should be able to encounter an ISP at random while navigating through the skill. So skill is expected to basically inform the customers that they can also unlock additional content or features if they're interested, right? So the second thing is offer a buy intent. Customers should be able to make a successful purchase using the buy intent, right? Then there should be a support for refund or cancellation. So if your skill supports ISP, then it should also have an option for the customers to request for refund. In case of a subscription, the customer should be able to discontinue it. And for consumable and entitlement, skill should handle the request by referring them to Amazon help section. Right? So in addition to that, consumables have an extra set of checks that we perform. So when it comes to consumable, upsell at the right time, when customers really have the need to use that ISP item, inform them about the quantity and the unit of the product that they would get with the purchase. For example, extra lives pack gives you access to 3 additional lives that you can use to stay in the game. Right when the game is over or they're about to exit, the session is about to close. At any point during the navigation, you should allow customers to inquire about the inventory of the consumable item, right? They should be able to ask how many lives do they have left. Another thing to ensure when it comes to consumables is that your skill should allow them to repurchase the product if it has been exhausted or if it has been used up. So in addition to these most common misses, the submission checklist for an ISP skill also includes that the description and the product names stay free of any typos or grammatical mistakes. Also ensure that you mention pricing only in the pricing fields and do not mention it in the product suggestion or in the purchase prompt, as it would lead to repetition. Another thing is you should also allow customers to experience the premium functionality that they have just purchased in the same session, and also when they come back to the skill in another session, they should be able to experience that purchase functionality. right? And another thing which Abhishek also talked about, I would like to just emphasize on that. So it certainly makes the review process easier if we have the testing instructions to refer to. So we'd request you to make use of the testing instructions field to mention steps to find the upsell, any notes on the previous feedback, or blockers in addressing any particular issues, so that we can try and be more detailed in our next communication. Yeah, that helps us.
That's great. Good feedback. All right, so we have a whole bunch of people here in the chat, and thank you all for answering my questions. I appreciate it. I want to make sure I welcome everybody that's here. There's already some really great questions, and just to set expectations with everyone, I did mention that I'm here at the Voice Summit. I actually have a talk, so I'm going to speak on Eastern Time. That's where I live. That's where I am right now in Washington, D.C. It is currently 12:17 p.m. I have a talk here at the Voice Summit at 1 p.m., which is normally when we wrap up office hours. So I'm going to need to stop about 10 or 15 minutes early today with our office hour stuff. So I want to jump right into the questions to make sure we can cover as much as we can. But at about 12:45, I'm really going to try and wrap things up because I need to get to my session and get ready for all that to start. Okay, so I know Gavin Watson here said he would have loved to have been here. Brian Tarbox is here. He's giving a talk. I actually got to meet Brian in person for the first time last night. It was very cool to sit and chat for a little while and talk about what's going on here at the event. On top of that, we had Habuma said he was regretting not submitting a talk this year. Next year for sure. I would recommend for all of you, if you have an opportunity to come to this event, it's a who's who. This is a networking event for sure. It's amazing the number of people and companies and technologies that are being addressed here. One of the keynotes this morning was from a company called Veritone, who is in the business of synthesizing famous people's voices. And so they're bringing back digital versions of people like Walter Cronkite and Vince Scully, who was a broadcaster for the Dodgers for many years, and bringing back their voices in a way that sounds exactly like them. Not just a synthetic version, but it really does sound exactly like them. That kind of stuff is all over the place here. It's very, very cool to see. All right, so the first question I have here is Gurunath on LinkedIn says, hey, I have some questions about Alexa skills to attract more traffic. Is this the right place to ask? Yes, this is absolutely the right place to ask. I'm not sure that we will have all of the answers for you, but I would be very happy to answer any questions you may have, Gurunath, so let me know. Don asked a question from YouTube, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'd love for your folks to have a perspective on this. Is there a way to have a pre-development conceptual review process with certification? He spent months developing a skill that uses Amazon Pay for Alexa, and he followed the developer docs to the letter, followed the certification guidelines, only to then be told that he failed certification weeks later for some unspecified policy reason. As a pre-development concept review, a dialogue, a two-way conversation with someone on the Alexa certification team may have helped him not start and build this whole thing before realizing that he was going to be wasting his time because it wasn't something that we were going to allow in the store. So the big question for you all is that something that developers can do today? Is there a way they can reach out to the certification team and say, hey, I have this idea. This is what I want to do. Does this, at its core, does this violate any policies, or should I not build this because you guys are going to decline it?
Yeah, I can take that. Well, the answer is yes. We do have support forums through which the developers could reach out to us today and maybe discuss their ideas, and we could also give them some best practices in skill building, right? But there are a few pre checks that happen at the skill building stage itself, but we continue to improve that. So we'd have to really take a look at the skill that we are discussing right now to see what went wrong. So we'd be happy to get more details of the skill so that we can do an in-depth review and get back with what went wrong.
Got it. So obviously they're gonna be in touch with you if they submit a skill for certification. Is there another direct way that they can reach out to you?
Yes.
Jeff, two channels. Sorry for interrupting. One, definitely you have the contact us channel through which the developers can reach out to us.
Okay.
Right. But in this specific case, if you could even we'll share an email address. I don't know if it's already put up on the chat. You could write into us. We can definitely prioritize it, and if need be, we can set up a one-on-one office hour to understand the issue as well.
Perfect. So I want to make sure everybody heard that. In the cases where you want to verify that your idea will work and that it'll pass certification just from a conceptual level against policy or something like that, you can go to the forums. You can use the Contact Us forum, but they do also have a direct inbox, which is alexa-developer-communication-team at amazon.com. So make sure you write that one down. If you do have questions about certification or policies, this is a good place to start. But like I said, if you're going through our traditional channels of Contact Us, or even just traditional certification, those also land with the same team. So you're not landing on a special elite SWAT team of certification or anything. It's the same people. Anyway, I'm glad we were able to share that. I think that's a really useful piece of information for everybody. Thank you for sharing that. Back to my list of questions, which is scrolling oddly today. Brian Tarbox wants to know, does a certification pass differ if a skill has made a tiny change, like changing a sample utterance or a slot value, versus if they've made a major change, like adding new intents?
Hey, Jeff, I can answer that question.
Okay.
So no, the certification process does not change, but when we do get a skill, skills resubmission, we have to test it from scratch. We perform all the checks again, and if there are any failures found, we report it out. So yeah, it's not like if the skill has one additional change, we test only that particular thing and leave the rest of it. We test the skill from scratch. We perform all the checks again.
Got it. That makes sense. Now, I was under the impression, and please tell me if I'm wrong here. I was under the impression, though, that if I have a skill that has passed certification and all I'm doing is adding a couple of slot values to a specific slot in my skill, that actually goes through an automated approval process and can actually get right through certification within a few minutes even of me pushing it, because there aren't any changes made to my skill except for a couple of new slot values. Is that still true? That may have just been something that was true once, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'd love to confirm that with all of you.
No, there are some checks that are automated, but few of the checks are manual and done by the testers here.
Yeah, basically we go by some flags, Jeff. You're right by saying that the automated tests are done. If there's any flags identified, right, it would trigger a manual certification, then go through it again.
But there is a possibility then that with no flags,
yes,
it could go right through without having to go through a manual check.
Yes.
Okay. Very, very good. Thank you. Good to get clarification on that. Fang Elm wanted to know if invocation names can be longer than 3 words. And it looks like we've already answered them. The answer is yes. But this leads me to another question. Is there a limit to the length of an invocation name? Because I don't think that's something that we've published. I didn't know if there might actually be a limit.
Well, I can take that. So the straight answer is yes, it can be 3 words, but again, there are a certain requirements to meet with 3 or more words, right? Like a skill cannot have, articles between the 3 words. So we would be happy to, recommend invocation name, if developers have specific questions related to, how many words it could extend to.
Makes sense. Okay. Dipanshu on Twitch also wanted to know, I know earlier, Deepika, you talked about the certification guidelines for monetization. Is there anything special about the review process for shopping actions that might be different than what we heard about for in-skill purchasing?
The checks are slightly different, Jeff, but I'll look for the documentation, and it would be really helpful if Dipanshu can reach out to us through Alexa Skills Insights team or through the support channel, and then we can share the relevant documentation.
Got it. Okay. So Gurunath on LinkedIn was the one asking earlier about managing traffic to their skill. And they asked if this was the place to ask questions. And so they now have their questions. The first one is, we have a skill on Alexa, and we see that the traffic is dropping day by day. So the first question is there any standard guide to improve our voice user interface? So Gurunath, the first thing that I'll recommend is taking a look at our Alexa design guide. I can't remember the URL off the top of my head, but I think it's like alexa.design/guide. Design see if I can type this out here quickly. Design/guide. Does that take me where I want to go? Yeah. Okay. So alexa.design/guide is the place that I would recommend you go. This is an entire set of documents in our tech docs that focus specifically on best practices in voice design, which is, as you're asking about your voice user interface, might be something to recommend. So that's where I would start with question number one, which is how do we improve our voice user interface? Is there a guide or recommendations or tips that we can use? I'm also giving a talk here at Voice. The talk subject is called 10 Things Every Voice App Should Do. And this, you can find a version of this talk on YouTube. I've given it a few different places. But if you haven't seen that talk before, there's also some really good tips in there about things you should think about as you're building skills. So between our design guide and this talk that I just mentioned, 10 Things Every Voice App Should Do, I think you'll find some really good tips in there. And I know you have some more questions coming, and I will get to those in just a second. So the next one is, Don said, I would love a critique of my skill, the one that I just mentioned that I've spent all this time building and then did not pass certification. Don, what I would recommend is take that email address that was provided, and I would send that over to the folks here on the certification team, and I'm sure they can provide you with some specific guidance on what you can do, I suppose. All right. Gurunath also says, I want to understand, is it possible to get a rank of our skill and some metrics or suggestions on what can be improved? Well, Gurunath, it's funny that you mentioned this because we recently launched a new feature during Alexa Live, which was late July, and it's called the Skill Quality Coach. It's part of the Developer Console, and you should be able to find a link in the Developer Console with that. But the Skill Quality Coach not only ranks your skill as a rank of quality based on a number of factors and metrics that we look at across skills, but it also provides you with a set of recommendations on things that you can do to improve that quality. So I would highly recommend, if you're going to go look at this as well, and maybe I can share my screen with you. If I go into a skill, let's go to this one. And go into analytics. It's on the analytics tab. And if I go to Skill Quality Coach, oh, that's right. I don't get my skill quality score until my skill has been published. But what I do get is skill recommendations. And so in there, we can look at things that are recommended about our skill and things that we can do in the near future to help improve what that score is going to be. So I would also take a look at that Skill Quality Coach. If your skill has already been published and you're just looking for better ways to improve it, as you mentioned, I would take a look on the Analytics tab of the Developer Console to take a look at that Skill Quality Coach. I think that will help quite a bit. Okay, continuing to move on. I really don't understand why my this scrolling is not working today. Oh, let's see. Thomas Lawrenson wants to know, is it acceptable to make live minor changes without resubmitting? So it depends on what your changes are. If you're making any changes to your interaction model, so this is any slots or intents or sample utterances or dialogue directives or any of that kind of stuff, then yes, we'll have to go through certification. However, if you're making changes to your code, this is the backend system, it might be in Node or Python or something like that. If you've identified that there's a problem with your code and you need to change your code, this does not go through certification. And so if you need to make a tweak to the code behind your skill, you can make changes to that without going through certification. The important thing I want you to walk away with, though, as you think about this, is that our certification team does review skills even outside of the certification process. And so if a skill is found to have started violating a policy or something because you went and changed a bunch of stuff after certification, that stuff can be found pretty quickly, and your skill can be pulled. And I'll give you a quick example of something that happened to me. So I published a skill a couple of years ago with the name Jeff Blankenburg. I wanted people to be able to ask me stuff, so it was like, ask Jeff Blankenburg to do this or that or whatever. But the skill was my name. Now, as someone that's worked on the Alexa team since practically the beginning, I knew the rule. The rule was you can't use someone's name as a certification, but I thought it would be fun and clever. And so I pushed it to certification, expecting that they were going to fail me. And they didn't fail me. It was missed. Maybe it's because my name is kind of weird. But I got through certification, and it was published, and it was available to the public. And for a few weeks, it was working great. And I thought, wow, I kind of got away with one there, but I'll take it. And about 3 weeks in, I got an email saying, hey, we apologize. We found that your skill was violating policy. and we pulled it from the store. Something I totally understand. I knew I was breaking the rule, and I was just lucky to have gotten through. And so even though I didn't actually make a change to my skill at all, they found that, in fact, I was in violation of the policy, and they found it. And so I just want to make sure everyone's aware. When I say, yes, you can make wholesale changes to your code, that doesn't mean that you can change it out for a bunch of things that shouldn't be there, because that stuff will be found. And then you don't want your skill to get flagged, or certainly your account to get flagged, someone that's trying to subvert the rules and get away with it. So just a friendly tip there. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? That's my own personal experience, but I'd love your perspective on that if you have any.
I agree with you, Jeff. We have a very strong monitoring system, so we are able to constantly review skills that are live in the catalog and also identify violations through our monitoring systems.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so David Curley on Twitch says, for a new skill, would you be able to advise on picking the best of, say, 2 or 3 possible invocation names from an engagement point of view? If they were to reach out to you, is that something you can help guide them on?
Definitely, Jeff. Yeah, we recently helped out a developer team to pick out the best invocation name, because the kind of skill that they were trying to build, we already have, a lot of skills out there that do the same functionality. So what they wanted was, what could we do to make our skill stand out, and how do we drive traffic to our skill? So we definitely help them, come up with a few invocation names that are unique. And even if customers are trying out, if they're not trying to invoke a particular skill, if the request is not targeted towards a skill, it would still kind of drive traffic towards their skill. So we help them pick an invocation name that's possible. I would request them to reach out to Alexa Skills Insights team.
Yeah, no, that's great. And the reason that I bring that up is because, as David adds, obviously once you've certified your skill and you've been published, you can't change your invocation name. And so any guidance they can get before they publish is obviously incredibly valuable, because changing your invocation name or building a new skill with a new invocation name can be quite tedious. All right, so Thomas Lawrenson on YouTube says, we found someone who did work for us through Fiverr who had stolen our code and submitted it as their own. They also copied others. Their skills were removed, but should they not be banned? This sounds like a revenge story. They're looking to exact revenge here. In those kinds of situations, is it possible, like, can developer accounts just be overtly just banned for consistently violating policy and rules, or doing something like stealing skill code and claiming it as their own? Is that something that we do?
Well, I think this is something that we'll have to take it offline, and maybe we'd like to hear more about this through the contact us page, and we can get back on what is the best course of action.
Okay, that's good advice. Let's see. Fayon wants to know if Alexa started giving priority to Alexa routines over built-in responses, such as what time is it? I'm now able to use that feature to launch my skill through an Alexa routine to provide a what time is it response. So Fayon, this is not necessarily a prioritization game. Like, nothing has changed. Routines always kind of have a top-level priority. And so if you build a routine that covers a built-in normal response, like what time is it, or tell me the weather, or something like that, your routine will be the thing that takes priority, and those first-party invocations kind of disappear. This does allow you as the user to create routines that could potentially provide you the experience you want for a specific utterance. And I do this all the time, right? We have one that's time for bed. And while time for bed isn't something that would trigger something normally on a device, it turns all my lights off and gets everything moving in my house, because that's the phrase that I want to say when those things happen. But if I wanted a very specific experience, some third-party skill that tells me the time in a unique, cool way, I could create a routine where the phrase that I want to use for it is what time is it, and then that phrase would now be targeting the experience that I've created in my routine rather than the first-party experience. So that's not a new prioritization, but that is how they work. I don't understand why I can't scroll all the time. Okay. Let's see. Brian Tarbuck says there's also there's times where he goes into the console and it says there's a button that says update live skill. He just removed a sample utterance for Amazon.stop and this button was available. So is that, I think that's probably different than certification, correct?
Yeah, that's right, Jeff. We would need to reach out to our tech team for who manages the developer portal. But these queries can be raised through contact us. We have the required support channels there, well connected to support these type of queries.
Okay, very good. A. Schuyler on YouTube wants to know if there's a link to the list of all of the Alexa policies, including the unspecified one Don referred to. So I can take a first shot at this, which is that, yes, there is a list that Karthik shared about our policies, and that is in the Alexa certification guidelines. Karthik, we got to get you a routine to turn that light on for you, man. I noticed you were just sitting in the dark there. Yeah, so in the Alexa certification guidelines, there's very much a list of all of our policies. As Karthik mentioned, as well as Don, there are specific kind of unspecified policies that are not listed there. There are times where you may run into something that is not a very opaque, clear policy in that sense. But there are things behind the scenes sometimes that we need to be cautious of as well. And so there is not, I would not call it a 100% complete list, but it is a very thorough list that you'll find at the Alexa certification guidelines. And you can find that just drop it into your search engine and type Alexa certification guidelines, and you will find that pretty easily. I don't know that I have a short link created for that one. Okay. PhelpsInc.net says, props to the skills certification team. I created a regressive error that I did not see in testing, and during that version update, the team found it. Thank you. That is something you guys are fantastic at, is finding small regressions or errors or changes. I can't tell you the number of times that I thought a skill was good and ready to go, and within 8 hours, I had a response back that like, hey, we found this bug and this bug and this bug. And it's like, gosh, how did I miss those things? But it's wonderful to not only have someone worrying about certification and pushing our stuff out to the public, but also making sure that it's working in the way that it's supposed to. It's a nice side effect of the certification process.
Thanks, Don.
All right. Andy Muncie wants to know if we can do a video of the Alexa developer console focused on the shopping analytics link. An explainer video would be good too. Andy, I'll add that to our list of. Goodness, I don't understand what's happening with my mouse today, but I can't do anything right now. Normally, I would mark that down and make this easier for myself, but it's just not cooperating. Okay. Let's see. We have PhelpsInc also wants to know about the update live skill button, and it's just to update the interaction model, new utterances, slot types, etc. So I think that may be where I was getting a little confusion earlier, because it's not really certification, but they recognize that like, hey, you added a slot value, you could just update the live skill without actually going through cert. So I think that was the missing piece that I had forgotten about. All right, I think I've gotten to the end of the list of questions, which is good because we only have about 5 minutes left, and I'm really struggling to scroll here. I don't know why. Come on, please. Agency 2, you said that you also have issues with Amazon Pay for doing pickup orders with your restaurant skill. Again, if I can bring up this banner, I would recommend if you have specific certification issues, if you haven't had success with Contact Us or through the normal certification process, they do have an email address available. I would recommend reaching out to them directly and have a conversation about what the issues you're facing are and how you might get around those. Hopefully you'll get the answers you're looking for. Okay, I'm going to give this scrolling one more try here. There we go. That worked. And I think I've still caught up to the end of the questions. So I know we have a little bit of limited time today. I've already seen some people that I'm in the room where I'm going to be speaking, but I still need to get everything set up. I've seen a few people come in and they're surprised that there's someone in here live streaming. So I think I'm going to start to put a bow on this episode of Office Hours. I certainly want to thank Karthik and Deepika and Abhishek for being here. Is there any final parting thoughts any of you would like to share before we sign off today?
Yep. Thanks for this opportunity, Jeff, and also request all the developers who are present here, take this opportunity to request them to continue sharing as much as feedback as possible for us so that we can improve our processes here, right? And you can share us feedback through the email address which we have provided, or through your certification emails. You have a quick link there where you can share your feedback or give your feedback to contact us as well. So that would help us a lot to improve our systems and processes.
Great. Someone asked to see the email address again. There you go. This, just as a reminder to everyone, this email address and this entire broadcast will be available on our Twitch channel as well as our YouTube channel in our video archives. And so if you need to go find this episode or you lost the email address or whatever, you should always be able to jump back in and find the episode from October 11th, 2022, which happens to be today. This is also my wife's birthday. I know you're thinking, Jeff, why are you in Washington, D.C.? Why are you live streaming? Go spend the day with your wife. Sometimes those are the things that happen in the world of Alexa. You need to be at the right place at the right time. But I've ordered many different small deliveries to our house today. So she's going to be getting surprises all afternoon. So I've made sure she has a delightful day while I'm not there. And I will see her tomorrow night. So with that, I want to thank the three of you for being here and for sharing your insights on certification. I want to thank all of you in the audience for being here and asking such insightful questions. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what you have for us in the coming weeks. Again, thank you guys all for tuning in. We will see you all very, very soon. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.